afternoon. My name is, let me lower this a little, Seema Rivera. I'm an assistant professor at Clarkson University in upstate New York. The title of my presentation is STEM Graduate Teaching Assistants, Learn Like Pre-Service Teachers, a novel idea, and STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and math. This is really program development and evaluation. This is a pilot project that we started last summer, and actually the next cohort of graduate TAs started yesterday. So when I go home back to New York, I'll be able to meet them. So one of the problems at many universities, at least in the US, is the problem of STEM attrition, meaning many students drop out of the STEM pipeline. Boys and girls can be interested in science and math or in STEM disciplines, and in around middle school age, which is about ages 10 to 12, they start losing interest, and then they continue on, and when they get to university level, research has shown that these are the significant impact factors of why students drop out of STEM, and they're listed here in order of importance. And so you can see that at the very top, classroom and academic climate is the main reason why students drop out of the STEM pipeline. Also grades, conceptual understanding, self-efficacy, interest, career goals, race, and gender. There's research on all of these topics and STEM attrition, but I focused on classroom and academic climate. And one of the reasons why we became interested in this, I should say before I go on, the dean of my school always likes to say that university professors are the most highly qualified individuals but have the least amount of training for their job. And so where can we look at where they get training, right? They get training when they're a PhD student, okay? And so that's where I started looking at GTAs, or graduate teaching assistants. Many of our TAs in our universities will get a scholarship and stipend to work and be a PhD student, and to work in their STEM discipline, they have to teach. They have to teach undergraduate students. And across the US, more than 50%, if you look at just bio and chem, it'll be 91% of undergraduate students encounter TAs. And so they'll either encounter them in their lab or in their recitation section. So many universities are dependent upon TAs to teach their undergrads. While that is true, there's very little training available for TAs. And so what happens is a TA gets a PhD scholarship stipend, and they come to the US, because we have many international students, they come to the US and they're expected to teach. And many of them have never even been in the United States before. And so as you can imagine, this is very daunting. And so the amount of training that's available is usually very little. Sometimes the training available is optional, and so when it's optional, of course, only people who are interested in improving their teaching will go take that training. But there's research that shows the initial training that you get for your teaching or your pedagogy has influence over your long life teaching. And so if they go on to become academic university professors, what they learn very early on can have impact later on. Because there's so little training for our graduate TAs, there's little research. However, there's also a lot of research showing there's a need for improving graduate teaching education. So what do we know about GTA training? We know that giving them pedagogy training early on can improve their teaching skills. That seems obvious. It improves their self-awareness, more persistence. They're more open to trying different pedagogical techniques. And again, like I mentioned, that many of these are optional though. So the studies that are out there are kind of skewed because the people who are involved in them are the ones that are interested in improving their teaching. And so that's a factor, confounding factor that we definitely addressed in this project, but that's always one I think that's going to be difficult because depending upon the contracts of the TAs, some deans can have students come in to these programs and some maybe don't require them. So the two research questions I had for this project: what significant themes emerge from STEM GTAs attending a summer pedagogy program? And what makes GTA pedagogy training successful, and what emerges as constraints? So what really happens in the program that propels their teaching and helps them, and what becomes obstacles in their pedagogy training? So like I said, this first cohort was a pilot project. This happened last summer. This doesn't happen very often, at least in universities in the US. All of the departments become very much like silos, so everybody's working in either biology and chemistry and physics, engineering, education. But for this project, we worked over 18 months. We had several meetings of faculty from engineering, math, physics, chemistry, biology, and education, which I just think that doesn't happen very often. And how did that happen? We had a lot of support from our deans, from our provost, and our university president. So last year was our first cohort. We had 7 GTAs, 2 female, 5 males. Last year represented were bio, chem, and math. This year we also had physics and engineering as well. And actually this year we have 2 early career faculty joining this program. Like I said, this is a joint creation, so this happened over almost 2 years of work putting together curriculum from all of these different departments. And what was tricky about this is that how teaching happens in engineering can be very different what happens with teaching in the math department, with what happens in education, et cetera. So we all had to kind of come to some agreement as to how we're going to help all of the TAs, because even though they're in different disciplines, they're all teaching undergraduate students. And a lot of our students, this is a highly engineering university, many of them are dual major. So a lot of them are math and engineering or bio and engineering, et cetera. And while they're they have dual majors, many of them don't really see the relevance if they're a physics major and they have to take biology, they don't really see why they need to know any biology at all when they're a physics major, and vice versa. So there was a lot of buy-in from departments to get this going. What was interesting about our program is that we based it off of our Master's in Arts and Teaching, our MAT program. So I work with students who are getting their master's to teach, and we have about a 13-month program to get their master's. So students come in the summer. Internally, we call it a boot camp. They're there for 6 weeks, and they're there every day from 8 to 4, learning general pedagogy, learning science pedagogy, and doing teaching lab. And so we took that program and we made a parallel program for the STEM GTAs, and that's how we created that. The framework that I used for this are 2 different lenses. One is contextualization or authentic tasks. Essentially what that means is you learn by doing, and the more you do, the better you will be at it. And so that's really a philosophy of our education department, and so we carry that over to the GTAs. So within that teaching contextualization, classroom management, organization, teacher prep, classroom persona, all of these things, even grading, all of these things that maybe are left to be assumed by the TAs on kind of how to figure that out. The second lens I used was teaching self-efficacy. This is highly correlated with student achievement, right? So if the instructor in front of the room has more efficacy, there's a relationship between student engagement in the classroom and student achievement in the long run. So those are 2 different lenses. And so one of the ways I looked at contextualization is that in the summer, every STEM PhD student was paired with another PhD student, and they were teaching lab partners. And so all summer they would teach mini lessons to each other, and they would record them. And then they would watch the videos together and kind of deconstruct everything that was happening in the room. And so this happened in the summer, and then I continued this videotaping process throughout the academic year. And so I went to their math recitation sections, their physics labs, et cetera, videotaped them, and then they watched themselves teaching and deconstructed everything that was happening. And that was an eye-opener, as you can imagine. The teaching self-efficacy, this came through in the journal entries. The students had to do reflections, they had to do interviews with me, and there was focus groups as well. And some of the reflections had writing prompts, and so that's how I looked at both of those projects. The methodology, this was primarily a case study methodology. As you can imagine, with 7 participants, it doesn't make sense to look at a quantitative study, and it's just too small. And so I used descriptive data, and there was open-ended coding. There was 2 rounds of coding. Me and my colleagues took the coding and we created themes based on the interviews, the transcripts from videos, and from the writing prompts. And so that was a case study. So there are 7 case studies in this. And so again, using qualitative research, this is not to generalize to a larger population, but instead the focus is to make them information-rich cases, and then to add to the current models that are already there about teaching. So to do this, we looked at the 7 cases separately. SIGTA means Summer Institute for Graduate TAs. So we looked almost kind of like a control group. We looked at the TAs who did not go through the program, and we looked at TAs who did go through the 6-week program. We had questionnaires for all of them. We had focus group interviews with both of them. I video recorded the TAs in our program and TAs outside of our program. I interviewed faculty, and those faculty are the ones that were doing work with the TAs, right? So every PhD student is working under a professor, and so I talked to all of those professors. And that was another factor that I really didn't think about until I encountered that, is that all of the faculty have different opinions about what they want their TAs to do. Some are very, I would say, very supportive in their TAs and wanting to learn and have them learn how to teach better. And some really wanted them just to grade papers. And some of them didn't want them to do anything to do with teaching except focus on research. And so, as you can imagine, that was I guess, interesting, and that might be another study to continue on. And then I did follow-up interviews throughout the year. So I did interviews early in the summer, and then I did interviews throughout the academic year to help validate the data. So I'm just going to give you some examples from the TAs. These are all pseudonyms. One was Sal from Sri Lanka. He had a stronger sense of teaching self by the time he was done with the program, so his self-efficacy improved. I'm going to show you some excerpts from their writing samples, and you should be able to see how the discourse changed in their own teaching methods. So this is a pre-post commentary. So if we look first at Steve, I don't know where I'm on time here. If I can read some of these, am I okay? So Steve, early in the summer, he said, I tried to explain the concept through examples. They do not like that. They need to figure it out. I just can't show them how to do it all. So the onus on the learning was on the students. Whereas you can see in the post, he really started to change. I'm using discussion techniques to engage students into the class. That will allow me to manage time and facilitate a good discussion among students. Even when students don't talk or are chatty, I'm confident I can help though. So his persona changed as he continued through the program. I won't read all of Sal's, but I just highlighted, I thought, some salient sections. Sal said, in Sri Lanka, this never happened. They respect the lecturer and at least tried to give an answer. But in the US, I cannot tell them you must give an answer. I tried to do that and they complained to the professor. I'm not sure this is my job to get them to try and give an answer. Again, so I'll talk about one of these themes that came out from this writing. And then Sal changed towards the end of the academic year. I don't think they're being disrespectful, but they don't want to be embarrassed in front of others. So he had a better understanding as to why the students were not speaking up in class. If you continue, Carl, I just follow what the professor tells me to do. I'm not sure how else to help each kid learn. I guess I thought they would be similar to each other in how much and what they know. And eventually he changed to, but now I see the need to help address student needs. So he was really looking at the context of who's in his class. Sarah says, it seems like getting them to talk is out of the question. And then she says, maybe it's an American thing, but they don't always volunteer to answer or speak up. I've been working on them getting up and being more comfortable in front of the room. And lastly, Ken says, I'm just not a good speaker or teacher, maybe. And by the end, he says, I'm still not 100% confident up there, but I think I'll be okay. I'll probably keep getting better. So two major themes that I noticed that came across in the data were the growth mindset theme and also cultural norms. Growth mindset, I know you probably have heard this idea of a fixed mindset and going to a growth mindset. That's something that I noticed as the TAs progressed through the program. They saw that there were opportunities in failure, whereas before maybe they just saw it as a failure and they would have to kind of work amongst themselves to figure it out. They saw watching themselves on videos an opportunity to how can I improve this. Cultural norms, you saw several students refer to their home country and then what happened in the United States. That was another theme that I was not expecting to see come across so much in the data. But putting together a program in the future, we really have to look at the cultural norms of teaching in a different country. So there is no continuum really for growth mindset. I just created a simple continuum from fixed to growth, and we coded the data to show that the students all moved towards growth. They all didn't get to growth, but they moved in that direction. And so I thought that was a good finding. And so I know I'm running out of time. Just really quickly when I'm talking about adding to the current teaching models, PCK, pedagogical content knowledge, and CK, content knowledge, are two factors that are talked heavily about in terms of teacher training and teacher essential skills that they need to have. So I would also add to that GM or growth mindset, and CI is cultural identity. What is the identity of the instructor or the person in front of the room, and how are they relating to the students that they're teaching? So really quick, reflective journaling, that really helped show the teacher persona that came out. Another factor that came out a lot was career goals, academia versus industry. Many of the students were decided upon they were going to work in industry, so they didn't really see how improving their teaching skills is going to help. And so another project I'm interested in is learning about if you improve someone's pedagogy or their teaching skills, does that impact their career and in their progress working even outside of academia? Are those skills that carry over to work outside of academia? Some constraints, like I mentioned, faculty, departments, discipline, pedagogy, it really is dependent upon the different faculty and the disciplines that they're working in. And very quickly, some limitations. Obviously, this was just the first cohort. We used like a general classroom observation analysis, but I would probably maybe try the COPUS next time. We only had 7 GTAs in different disciplines. I would try to get more in all of the disciplines. And I didn't look at undergraduate student impact. I think that would be important to look at, but it would have to be carefully done because that's very noisy, right? How can you tell what the GTA is doing is really impacting the undergraduate student, right? They're impacted by many different factors when they're in the university. These are just some examples of prompts that we use for growth mindset. You know, we rated students based on, do they agree with these kinds of statements or did they disagree with these kinds of statements? And depending upon how they selected answers to this, we gave them a score. And these are my references, and this is my email if you have any questions. Should I take questions now or at the very end?
So Seema, thank you very much for the presentation. First, yes. Well, as I'm a dean of a business school, we also have some topics like mathematics, and you can imagine that our students are not that happy with these technical subjects so far. How could we encourage our teachers in order to improve their teaching skills? Would your concept work?
I mean, you know, everybody working in academia is reading research, right? So by putting out more studies like this, maybe showing some of the videotapes of the teachers or the TAs watching themselves deconstruct their own teaching, I think that would maybe have some impact. And I will say that we are also, even though we're in education, we're doing a pilot for the business school within our university just the end of this summer to try and put together a program like this. So I will be happy to share that, you know, moving forward.
Yeah. And I have one question because I saw one sentence, I wrote it down. It was a self-reflection sentence. I'm not a good speaker, probably I'm not a good teacher. What are you going to do with this graduate? Yeah.
I know, right? Luckily that was in the so that was early in the summer, and you can see that changed by the end of the summer, but I think that's exactly why we're doing this, right? We don't want people teaching, you know, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are also not confident in front of the room, especially when we know self-efficacy has impact on student achievement. And so that's something that we're working on.